Hello friends, I welcome you to StudyIQ, India's largest educational channel. My name is Dr. Mahipal Singh Rathod, and in this video I will be discussing the American Revolution. It is a very important topic of world history along with the other revolutions like the French and the Russian revolutions. You should be very thorough with it. If you are not reading anything else in world history, please at least go through the revolutions and the world wars. So this is very important for the GS1 paper in UPSC Civil Services Examination. So I will begin with discussing what exactly is the American Revolution and what is the American Revolutionary War. So these are two interlinked things, but there's a slight difference. See, American Revolution is the entire process where the enlightenment of the society began, where people started to think about a different separate country from the British rulers. And this all started around 1765 and it terminated in 1783. And after a few years of this revolution beginning, and a war started, an outright war, where fighting started around 1775 and it stopped in 1781 and the treaty was signed in 1783. So this is called as the American Revolutionary War or the American War of Independence. So they are linked, yes, but not completely. Okay, you can say that the War of Independence is actually a part of the American Revolution. So this war was fought between whom? So on one side were the Patriots, or those Americans who wanted freedom from the English. They were supported by the French Empire, and on the other hand were the English rulers, the English army, and there were some people who were loyal to the empire. They were the people who were living in America, but they were loyal to the English rule. In this video, again and again, you will come across the term colonists. So colonists means that all the people who are living in the British colonies of America, all the 13 colonies of America, those people are colonists. So out of them, most of them were patriots. They wanted independence, around 80%, and around 20% of the people did not want independence. They were happy under the English rule. They said, we are similar, we are of the same race, we speak the same language, we have the same religion, the set of ethics that we are governed by, the laws are similar. So why do we need independence? So these people were the loyalists. Okay, they both are colonists. Why do we call them colonists? Because they went from Europe and colonized this American continent. The native people who were living there since hundreds of years, thousands of years, they were called the Native Americans. They are called Native Americans today, but earlier they were called Red Indians. Why Indians? Because I think you might know Christopher Columbus, who very famously started searching for India, but instead he landed in the West Indies and he refused to believe that he was mistaken. He called them Indians, and that name stuck for centuries. And even today some people call them Indians. But in fact, the correct terminology now is Native Americans. So these are the Native American people, a glimpse of their life, how they used to live, and they traded with these. They traded with other tribes, and later on they traded furs and other produce of the forest with these colonists. So I will talk a little about the colonial history of America. In 1492, Christopher Columbus, he reached West Indies. Don't say he discovered America. He discovered nothing. There were people living over there. He just stumbled across the continent and he reached at the place that today we call the West Indies, the islands in the Caribbean Sea. He was sent by the ruler of Spain. So Spain was the first power to reach America and they started their colonies soon after. Slowly others also caught up, especially the kingdoms of France and later the British. In the 16th and 17th century, all the major European powers colonized North America. And England had 13 colonies starting from 1607 to 1732. So within a span of almost 130 years, they had established 13 different colonies. We are talking about just have a look at this map. It shows the locations of the three large colonial powers around 1700 AD. So along the coast, here we have the British colonies. They were divided into 13 different colonies. Then in the south here we have Spain, somewhere around the areas of Mexico, Arizona and California here. Then in the middle we have France. Basically they were living around this region, okay, the Louisiana, the present day state of Louisiana. But they claimed this all territory. But mostly here Native Americans were living and they had trading points. The French colony had trading points along this Mississippi River. This is the longest river in North America. Remember this. This is Mississippi. And these are the Great Lakes. So you can see this is the rough distribution of territories around 1700. Bear this map in mind because it will come to our use later when the territories change. Here is a detailed map of the 13 colonies. No need to remember the names, but they correspond to the modern states of roughly New Hampshire, New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. So these are the 13 British colonies that were established from around 1607 to 1732. They were well established, but you can see that they are not going beyond this area. Why? Because there is a mountain chain here. It is called the Appalachian mountain chain. So expansion towards this side was a bit difficult, and here was all Indian territory in this side. The aim, the purpose for setting up, developing and governing these colonies was benefit of the mother country. They were not doing any charity. Spain wanted her own prosperity, France wanted its own, and British had their own interest to increase their wealth, to become more powerful. That is why they were developing these colonies, getting their resources, and so on. Now we come to the causes of the American Revolution. We have seen a background of how the North America was in the around 1750. Now we will see what caused this revolution. Any revolution is caused by a mixture of factors. There is no one cause. There can be a triggering event that leads to the beginning of the revolution, but usually it has more deep-rooted causes. So the first category is the socio-cultural cultural reasons. The second is the political, and the third are the economic causes. So we start with the socio-cultural causes. Lot of the people who came from Europe and settled in North America, they were political or religious dissidents. It means that they were persecuted by the King of Spain. So for example, if the King of Spain was Catholic and there was a Protestant in Spain, they were not allowed to live peacefully. They were forced, they were taxed heavily, and they were not allowed to practice their religious beliefs and practices freely. So what they did was they migrated to North America. Similarly in England, the Catholics were persecuted by the king because he was not Catholic. So some people from England, they left, they settled in Netherlands. Then again from Netherlands, they came to America. So many people who had come here were already persecuted politically or on religious basis. So they said that we will establish an ideal society. So they themselves wanted an ideal society, and they had liberal or progressive thinking. And this liberal and progressive thinking was mainly inspired by the ideas of the Age of Enlightenment. See, there was a period in Europe, in philosophy, in science, in thinking, in government, in governance. This is called the Age of Enlightenment. It lasted from 16th to 18th century. A lot of philosophers gave their own policies. People started asking questions like why is the king the king? Why will the king's son be the next king? Why cannot I be the king? Why cannot someone else be the king? Such questions were never asked earlier, but during this Age of Enlightenment, people started asking these questions and philosophers gave answers to them. So there were some ideas like natural law, like a person who is born, he has some natural rights and there is a natural law that has to be followed in the society. Then there were ideas of liberalism, property rights, republicanism. What is republicanism? That the head of the state will not be a king. So such ideas began to take shape by the writings of Western philosophers in Europe, like John Locke. He is called the father of liberalism. He said that the power comes from people and not from the king. Then there are other philosophers. Just remember their names, especially Locke. Locke inspired American Revolution quite a lot. Then there is Immanuel Kant, Montesquieu, Benjamin Franklin. He himself was an American. He was not a European. He was an American philosopher. Then Thomas Paine. He was also an American writer. His name will come again in the lecture. Second, we come to the political causes. The colonies, they had self-appointed legislature and executive. So there was some sort of democracy in these 13 colonies. They had a legislature which could frame laws, and the executive, that is the government bureaucracy, that was mainly from the American people, the people colonists who were living there. Although the higher officials always came from Britain, and most importantly, the head of the government, that is the governor. The governor of each of these colonies was appointed directly by the British Crown in London. So he had a veto power. He could do anything he want. He could overturn the laws, and generally he was more powerful. But still, there was some sort of democracy. As I said, there was not absolute monarchy here. There was some power in the hands of the people, and this was the setup when the American Revolution started. But the problem that these people had was that no representation is given to us, that is the colonial people, in the parliament in London. We are living in America. You are governing us from London by making laws sitting there. The people who are making laws, we have never met them. They don't know us. How can they make laws for us? So give us some representation so that some of our people will go to London and sit in that parliament. But this was not allowed. So it is said no representation. And later on it became a very famous cry of the revolution, no taxation without representation. But initially it started with just representation problems. Now I will talk about the economic causes. So initially when the colonies were established, their main aim was to trade with the mother country and to prosper the mother country's trade networks. But slowly inter-colony trade started between these 13 colonies. Why? Because see, the southern colonies, they were producers of cotton and tobacco, and when the northern areas were industrialized, gradually when the industrial revolution came around, so they started importing their materials, raw materials from the southern colonies. Similarly, whatever the north produced, it was sent to the markets of the southern colonies as well. So inter-colony trade also started developing, and it made them interdependent, and it made them think of themselves as one. The British, they did not think of them as one. They thought of them as 13 different colonies. The governor was different in all of these. The government structure was also a little bit different. But they started thinking that we are one. We are part of one continuous continent, and we are similar. Our rights, our demands, and our aspirations are similar. So this came about because of the trade relations. Also, the liberal ideas of the society, the Enlightenment ideas, they were starting to affect the trade and economy as well. People thought beyond the mercantilism of the British trade, and they became materialistic, and individualism started. These are the characteristics that in future defined the American economy. Now, Britain was trying its best to preserve its interests, to preserve its own trade. So to serve her own mercantilist interest, mercantilism means, the word is derived from merchant, so free trade. Okay, so British merchants, their interest was paramount. To save their interest, Britain passed various navigation acts, and these were harmful for the colonies. So first act was in 1651. What did it say? That any trade that is going on from America, they have to use only British ships for their transport. You cannot use any Spanish ships or even French ships, even though they might be cheaper, but you have to use only British ships. So this made the transport cost more. In 1660, they passed another law that said that sugar, tobacco, cotton, and indigo, these were the main crops of America. They can be exported only to England, not to India, not to Spain, not to France. Even if you're getting more price there, you can only sell to England, any company sitting in England. Then in 1663, they said all trade to colonies will go via England only. So for example, if the East India Company wants to send tea to America, it cannot send its ship directly from India to America. The ship has to go to London, where all the ingredients will be opened, they will be unloaded onto the docks, then they will be taxed and again loaded onto ships, and then they will be sent to America. So basically the cost will increase, and the British government will find another excuse to get its tax. So this is a map showing the thriving North Atlantic Ocean trade in the 16th, 17th, 18th century. You can see here there are raw materials like sugar, molasses. They are going from the southern United States and the Caribbean islands to northern colonies of New York and Massachusetts here. And also slaves are coming from Africa to America. All these slaves are then further going to American colonies here. Then whale oil, lumber, furs, rice, silk, indigo, tobacco, these are the main products from here. They are going to England because they can only go to England. And from there, manufactured goods or luxurious goods are sent back to America. And these things can also now further go on to Africa or India from England. So they have to go to England. You can see how much long this is. They can directly trade here, but no, they were not allowed. So this was the North Atlantic trade. It was very important. It was a thriving trade business. But the colonists, the people living in America, they got around these laws by smuggling. They simply smuggled these goods out of the country without paying any tax illegally. The enforcement of these laws was very relaxed. It was not strong, so it didn't hurt the colonists' interest too much. But after 1763, their enforcement became strict. I will tell you why. Because a war had ended and Britain was in debt, so they needed the money. But before that, for almost 100 years, it was in a very relaxed mood. No one was very strict, and the colonists were also making profit. British were also making profit. Now we start with the course of events in the American Revolution. In 1754, a war started in North America. This is called the 7 Years' War. Although 54 to 63 is 9, but still it is called 7 Years' War because most of the fighting started in 56 and carried on till 63. So it was fought between Britain and France over territories in America, and since they both were colonial powers with colonies all around the world, it soon spread to 5 continents. In India, this was manifested in the Third Carnatic War. Remember this while reading the modern Indian history, you have to link both of them. France was defeated in this 7 Years' War and it lost most of its territory in North America. The Treaty of Paris was signed in 1763 and this is how the war ended. This is a map in 1750 before the war began. Okay, so you see here the blue colored territory, light blue, this is all France, and the pink colored one here is Britain. And as I told you, Mississippi River, they had most of their forts along this. So you can see here these star marked, they are all the trading forts. So they are along the river and all this inside territory, Indians were living here. And most of their cities were along the coastal region. So this is the map before 1750, before the 7 Years' War. After the 7 Year War, all the territory east of the Mississippi River was given to Britain by France. So you can see this pink colored area, this is now controlled by England. And here west of Mississippi, this was given to Spain. So basically France's rule in North America was almost over. They were nowhere in power. Now Spain and America were the most powerful empires, and Spain was mostly powerful in this area. Okay, this is, no one was living here. There was hardly any settlement in this region. So there was no threat. Earlier, the British colonies had a threat from France because they could attack them. France could attack them from this area and try to capture these. But after this war, the French threat to the colonies is gone. Due to this 7 Years' War, Britain went into heavy debt. The national debt of Britain almost doubled after this war and they were paying huge interests. So to make their financial situation a bit better, they planned to tax the colonists. Why? Because their reasoning was that this war would benefit them the most, because the colonists will get more land, they will get more resources, and they have security. They won't be attacked by the French. So it is obvious that we should tax them. They are the biggest beneficiaries of this war. And colonists, on the other hand, they thought that we will go and settle in all these new areas now that the France is not there to protect the Indian areas. We can go over the Appalachian Mountains and expand, make new farms, new territory, new homes. But the government forbid them. Why? Because some of the Indian tribes had supported British in the 7 Years' War, and they said that leave this area alone, and the British said that okay, we will not allow the colonists to settle in them. So it was a concession given to the Native American tribes, but this was not very welcome by the colonists. So this is the proclamation line of 1763. It is basically the line running along the crest of the Appalachian Mountains and Indian Reserve, you can see here. So it was given as a concession to the Indians so that their territory is not occupied by the colonists. But the colonists were very angry. They were thinking that we will go and expand quickly. And on the other hand, they were being taxed more now. So you can understand the double shock that they received. You cannot expand and you will be taxed more. So around the time of this war, a new king came to the throne of England. His name was King George III. He became the ruler in 1760, ruled till 1820, 60 years. He became the king at a very young age of 22, and during this entire period of American Revolution and many other wars, he was the king. So it is said that he took this American Revolution very personally. He thought that it is a personal insult to the king that people are revolting against his rule, so it should be put down at any cost. And the war escalated to it escalated quite a bit. Now we will discuss the unpopular acts that were imposed by the British government, by the British Parliament after the 7 Years' War. So as I told you, they wanted money, they were in debt, British government was in huge debt, so they started imposing different acts on the colonies. First was the Sugar Act of 1764. This said that sugar will be exported only to England. So sugar was a big produce of America, as I told you, sugar, tobacco, indigo. So it will be exported only to England. You cannot sell it to anyone else. So it was a very unpopular act. Then came the Quartering Act of 1764. It said that whatever British soldiers are there in America, the people living there, the colonists, they will provide them lodging. Lodging means home. So if the soldiers require somewhere to stay, they have to let them stay in their houses, their own homes. And if asked for, they also have to provide money for the lodging of the soldiers. So basically, whatever army, the British army is stationed in America, it has to be paid for by the people living in America. Even though the army is not doing them any good, it is not fighting any war with them, but still they have to pay for their salaries and also provide lodging for them. This was very controversial, because imagine 100 soldiers coming to your area and saying that we want a place to stay, and you have to allow them. Even if you don't want, you have to allow them into your homes to sleep, to eat food. So this was quite controversial and unpopular. Quartering Act of 1764. Then came the Stamp Act of 1765. Stamp Act simply said that now onwards, all the legal documents like will or any kind of property transfer, all the newspapers, basically anything that is printed will be required to have a stamp on it. The stamp was something like this, and this stamp will not be free. If you are printing a paper, you need to have a stamp. So let's say the stamp costs something around 10 shillings or 1/10 of a pound, whatever. Although the amount was very less, but if you come to think of it, if you're printing 100,000 newspaper copies, the amount will be quite big for a person who is running the newspaper. And also all the legal documents. So for a lawyer, this will be a huge cost. So this affected the lawyers, the journalists, and educated people, because who uses paper? The educated people. Now come to think of it, these are the last set of people in the world that you want angry at you. Lawyers who know the law, and journalists who can reach out to people by their writings, by their newspapers. So these were very angry and protests started. People there said that no taxation without representation, and this became a very important slogan of the entire American Revolution. You can see here in this photograph, people are reading the Stamp Act when it came out, and there was suddenly chaos. You need stamp on everything. Every paper that is printed needed a stamp. So to protest these stamps, the American newspapers started printing this symbol of bones and skull on the newspapers. They said that we will not print this stamp. Instead, we will print this stamp because it is like death knell for us. Around the same time, an organization was formed. It was called the Sons of Liberty in 1765. It was led by Samuel Adams. He advocated use of violence. He advocated boycott of British goods, and he said that trade with Britain should be stopped. Okay, they should be stopped here. So trade with Britain should be stopped. So he was a very radical thinker. He said that stop British Empire, we have to use violence, we have to beat them up, we have to fight against them. But around this time, the majority opinion was not of fighting. They were just not happy with the taxes. That's it. They wanted these taxes removed. They did not want independence. They did not want any kind of self-rule or home rule. No. But this guy started that no, this British Empire has gone too far, and they are imposing taxes on us which are not necessary and they are wrong for us. This is against our rights. And in that age of enlightenment, other people also joined him and they started thinking that yes, this is against our natural rights, that we should not be taxed if it is not helping us, if the money is not coming back to our society. These Sons of Liberty and Samuel Adams, they formed the Committees of Correspondence, which were crucial links in this American War of Independence. See, these Committees of Correspondence, they were tasked with communicating with each other. So they wrote letters to each other in all these 13 colonies. So there are a lot of towns, and you must realize that these colonies are not small, they are very big, they are large geographical areas. So you need very efficient communication between them to coordinate your activities. So in one colony you are protesting British goods, in another you are partying with them. So this cannot go on. So there needs to be a unified chain of command. So this was provided by these Committees of Correspondence. Later on, these committees only led to the formation of Continental Congress, and they were a part of the fighting the Continental Army's war effort also. So in 1766 comes the Declaratory Act. This repealed the Stamp Act because there was so much protest against the Stamp Act, it was repealed. But at the same time, the Parliament said that the King and the British Parliament have all the powers to make laws and tax the colonies in future. So basically they said that because you are angry, we will remove one act, the Stamp Act, which you do not like. But we have the power to make laws and tax you in the future. So the American people were like, what is going on? One, we are telling that we do not want to be taxed unnecessarily, and you are telling that in future also we will do this. How is this just? This is unjust. Then we have the Townshend Act of 1767. It was formed by Charles Townshend. He was the Chancellor of the Exchequer. It means the Finance Minister of Britain. He is called the Chancellor of the Exchequer. According to this, three things were done. Firstly, New York's legislature was suspended because they had failed to honor the Quartering Act. They had failed to provide lodging to the soldiers. Second, it taxed the essential goods like tea, paper, glass, lead, paint. Tea was consumed by everyone in the British society as well as American society. It was brought from India by the East India Company and it was very popular. It is a commodity that is consumed many times and by everyone. So it is like sugar or wheat. You can say that it is a part of the daily routine. So it was very common. Everyone had to buy it. If you tax this, everyone suffers. Then paper, glass, lead and paint. These are all very important to build a house. So you can imagine that it will become costly to build a house if you tax these items. Also, the British authorities were now empowered to search any building, any house or any ship in American colonies. This was also very unpopular. Any British officer can just barge into your house without a warrant or without any proper reason. So again, protests started against this Townshend Act, and while these protests were going on, Boston Massacre happened in 1770. What happened was people were protesting the British officers in their office in Boston, and the British soldiers opened fire. 5 protesters were killed. So much for calling it a massacre, but still it is very important because it was publicized heavily by the efforts of patriots like Paul Revere and Samuel Adams, the same Samuel Adams who formed the Sons of Liberty earlier. So they used as a propaganda. They printed photographs. This painting was used and circulated widely by Paul Revere, and this became like the Jallianwala Bagh tragedy in India. It had such an importance. But although in India thousands were killed, here only 5 protesters were killed. But this Boston Massacre turned the public opinion against the Crown rule and its policies. Earlier, people were angry with the taxes, but they were not completely against the British rule. They were not against the British king. They never used to curse him. But now slowly, after this Boston Massacre, things changed. People started thinking that no, there is something wrong with the British rule. We should do something about it. And the patriots like Paul Revere, Samuel Adams, they have a point. Then we come to the Tea Act of 1773. So in 1772, a new British Prime Minister, Lord North, he announced that all those earlier taxes on lead, paint, glass, it will be removed. Only tea will be taxed. Why tea? Because it was benefiting East India Company. East India Company had huge reserves of tea lying in their warehouses in London, and they wanted to get rid of it, and so they wanted to sell it in America, and that is the reason that tea was taxed. And against this rule, the protesters refused to sell tea from East India Company in America. I'm sorry, not USA, America. And also they said that ships laden with the tea cargo will not be allowed into harbors or ports. So firstly, if any ship is coming, we will not allow it to come into the port. And if it comes to the port, if the cargo is coming into the cities, we will make sure that no one buys this East India Company's tea. Now the governor of Massachusetts, which was one of the colonies, his name was Hutchinson. He declared that he will have the ships unloaded in Boston Harbor. He was like, no, this is all wrong. Whichever ships are coming from East India Company, I will have them. I will ensure that they are safely unloaded in Boston Harbor, in my city. So when these ships came into the harbor, the same Samuel Adams, he led a party of men and they all dressed up as Native Americans. They boarded those ships and they threw all this cargo containing the tea from East India Company into the harbor, into the sea. You can see in this photograph, they are dressed up as Indians, they are Native Americans, and they are throwing all this cargo in the water. So this is called the Boston Tea Party. It was not a party exactly in the way that you imagine party today in the 21st century, but later on it was called as the Boston Tea Party. It happened on 16 December 1773 and they threw tea worth 10,000 pounds. It is said the present value of that tea would be somewhere around 1 million pounds. So 1 million pounds of tea was thrown into the water. In response to the Boston Tea Party, the British Parliament passed Intolerable Acts of 1774. Actually, these were set of 4 different acts, and together they are called as the Intolerable Act of 1774. First thing, public meetings in town halls were banned. No public meetings allowed. You cannot discuss the overthrow of British Empire. You cannot discuss anything against the empire. All the meetings by Sons of Liberty are now banned. Second, Boston port will be closed until compensation is given by the colonists for the dumped tea to the East India Company. They also asked for the arrest of Samuel Adams and him to be handed over to Britain. Finally, there was this Quebec Act. This is not very important for you. It extended the boundaries of British rule Quebec, that is in modern day Canada, so that the boundaries of the American colonies were fixed now. They could not extend towards north. In response to all these Intolerable Act measures, the Patriots started training militias. They started training people for fight, and weapons training was given in the areas around Boston because there was a fight looming with the British. They knew now that fight is coming. In such an atmosphere, the first Continental Congress was called in September 1774. Congress simply means a meeting or a congregation of people. So representatives of all 13 colonies were together for the first time, and this was the first time that something like an American government was formed. You cannot call it an American government. Don't call it as an American government. I'm saying it is the first semblance of an American government formed. They decided to boycott British goods. They decided to increase the use of domestically produced goods. So this is like the Swadeshi Andolan of India. And they decided to stop trade with Britain. Okay, so this is the first Continental Congress. After this first Congress, hostilities break out and American Revolutionary War begins. By 1775, early 1775, the first battle was at Lexington and Concord. The name is not important for you at all. I am not going to discuss the battles because they are important only for the students of American history in America, not for anyone else. So here we need to know the overview of the American Revolution, the causes, the effects. That is the important part for us. So in April 1775, the fight started. The army of the Continental Army, the American Army, was led by General George Washington, very famous person. He became the first president of United States later. They had support from and controlled the countryside, all the village areas, while the cities were contested bitterly. Actually, they conquered Boston very soon, but later they lost New York. New York also they had captured, but the British Army came and they took back New York. And it was with them for a long time, but Boston was captured. So it went on for a long time that cities were contested, but rural areas, whenever they were defeated in the cities, they went back to the rural areas, they regrouped there, they rearmed, and they came back to fight for the cities. King George III was petitioned in July 1775 by the Congress, the first Continental Congress, to stop these oppressive laws and avoid full-blown war. So even after the war had started, the fighting had started, the people in the Congress, they said that let's talk to the king, let's try to talk to the king and we can see that we can avoid this war or not. But he declared the Congress as traitors. He said that you are trying to usurp the power that has been bestowed on the British Parliament and the British monarch, and I will not let this happen. So, as I told you earlier, he kind of took it personally that the revolution was against him, and he said completely no to any kind of conciliation. Many colonists who were rich traders in cities were benefiting from the trade policies of British. They were still in favor of the British rule. They were called loyalists. It is said that around 15 to 20% of the people in America at that time, 15 to 20% of these colonists, they were loyalists. They stayed loyal to the British Empire, and they helped them in any matter they could. In early 1775, there was a pamphlet written by Thomas Paine. It was named Common Sense. Initially, when it was written anonymously. No one knew it was by Thomas Paine. Later only we came to find out that it was by Thomas Paine. This was a 48-page pamphlet, and it advocated for independence. So he was talking about independence. Remember, the first Continental Congress had not demanded independence. They had just boycotted British goods, stopped trade, use of domestic products, and so on. But Thomas Paine, he wrote that we need independence. He wrote it in very simple language that could be understood by everyone, and he was very persuasive. He used persuasive arguments and reasons. This pamphlet was read widely in taverns, bars, places where people sit and discuss things. And it is said that if you count the percentage, that the number of pamphlets that were distributed by the population of US at that time, so this has been the most widely circulated book of all time, even till today. Such was the impact of this Common Sense pamphlet that people suddenly thought that yes, independence is what we want. And by the time the second Congress was convened, they declared that we will get independence, and they started fighting for it. So by early 1776, in all the 13 colonies, Patriots had overthrown their existing governments, and the courts were closed. They had driven away all the British officials. They had elected their own legislatures, which could form their own laws, and new constitutions were being drawn up. So this is by 1776. They also declared that now there were states and not colonies. Can you see? United States of America. That is what they became after the Revolutionary War. The Second Continental Congress was convened in 1776, and on 4th of July 1776 they adopted the Declaration of Independence, which was written by Thomas Jefferson. This date today is celebrated as the Independence Day of USA. So remember this, 4th of July 1776. The famous line written in the Declaration of Independence: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. All men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness." Thomas Jefferson took these values, life, liberty, and actually it was property. It was given by John Locke. Locke had given these three basic rights: life, liberty, and property. So Thomas Jefferson replaced property with pursuit of happiness, and this was the famous line written by him. The Second Continental Congress oversaw the war effort. So actually this Second Congress acted as the government of the day. So this was the acting government of United States at that time. And they were joined by the French Empire. They received full help from France. France sent its army, they sent money, they sent ammunition, ships, navy, everything to help America. Why? Because they were against Britain. France and Britain were enemies of each other in many places in the world. They were fighting a lot of times, and also they wanted revenge for their defeat of 7 Years' War. They wanted to make the British weak in North America, because France had been wiped out from North America after the 7 Years' War. But France nearly bankrupted itself supporting the American in War of Independence. Also, Spain and Netherlands helped the Americans. The war ended in October 1781 when General Cornwallis surrendered at Yorktown. Remember this name, Cornwallis? He later came to India also as the administrator. Here he is surrendering at Yorktown. In 1783, Treaty of Paris was signed. The war ended officially after the signing of this treaty. American independence was recognized finally by Great Britain. and around 100,000 soldiers died fighting in this war from both the sides combined, around 1 lakh. Most of them died due to disease. Around 80% of the soldiers in this war died due to disease, malnutrition, or other causes, not because of the fighting. This was a very unique feature because at that time medicine was not that much developed, medical facilities, medical technologies were not developed, so a lot of soldiers lost their lives due to illness and diseases. What is the significance of the American Revolution? First thing, it gave independence to the United States of America and a new brand of nationalism came about. So this nationalism in USA developed because of American Revolution. If there was no American Revolution, there would be no country called United States of America and there would be no nationalism in America. Second, a different type of state was formed. This is the most important significance. A different type of state. There were lots and lots of monarchies in the world, lots and lots of colonies in the world at that time, in the late 18th century. But for the first time, a mass-based and not leader-based kingdom had come. There was no king who had won a battle and he was proclaimed king, but a common committee of people who had led a lot of people to victory and they had formed a republic. What do you mean by republic? Any king or his son or any relative of the king. So no king, the head of the state will be elected. He will always be elected. And in this manner, the entire noble class was gone. Now there was no nobility in USA. For example, in England or in other European societies, you would have seen there are barons, there are lords. There is nothing like that in America because of this American Revolution. Then due to the American Revolution, USA has been an anti-imperialist nation for a long time. Although later their own policies in some cases were imperialistic, but most of the time throughout history, US has been an anti-imperialist country, and this has come to aid of many countries in the 20th century when decolonization was going on. A blueprint for uniting people for a cause was given by this American Revolution. You must understand that when American Revolution started, the people of those 13 colonies did not have very much in common. They were not united per se, but due to some reasons that I have discussed, they came together, and this has been a blueprint for many revolutions throughout the history of world. How to bring people together by writings, by teachings, by propagating one idea, using propaganda, and many other things. Also, ideas of enlightenment that had been around for almost 100 years before this American Revolution took place, for the first time they found their real world application. No one had used those ideas. John Locke said that power comes from the people, but he used to live in England. The power came from king or the parliament later. Power never came from people. There was no election, there was no democracy that 100% people are voting. But now, the ideas of enlightenment that were given by the Western thinkers, they had found their real world application. A very important feature of this idealism was that no American is inherently superior to any other American. This is what was the ideal of this revolution. See, in European society, it depends where you are born. If you are born to a king, if you are the son or the daughter of a king, you are born in a different class. Your superiority will always be different. It does not matter that you are an idiot or you are the most intelligent person on the earth. It does not simply matter. Even if you are an idiot, you will get the same amount of respect that the most intelligent person in the world will get. But now in America, this is not the case. If you are an idiot, you will get the respect of an idiot. But if you are intelligent, you will get the respect that any intelligent person deserves. Whether you are rich, you are poor, whether you are a man who is very old, he is 80 years old, or a person who is 25 years old, it does not matter. Inherently, no one is superior to any other person. Okay, what does inherently mean? That is by birth. No one is superior to any other person. Finally, it led to inspired many other revolutions, especially the French Revolution. In fact, one of the causes of French Revolution was the involvement of France in American Revolution, which almost bankrupted the French crown. And the Latin American ones in 1820s and 1830s, all the countries in South America, Latin America, they revolted against Spain and they got their independence. British Empire changed its policies world over, especially in India. So you can see Pitt's India Act was brought in 1784, and later on Cornwallis, who was sent to India, he brought his administrative reforms. See, in Pitt's India Act, the company was brought under the control of Crown. This was done, why? Because the Crown, the British Crown, was fearful that tomorrow what if the East India Company does the same thing that the colonists have done? What if they say that we don't want anything to do with the British Crown or the British Parliament? India is ours and we will rule over India. What if they just simply sever their link from the British Crown? So to prevent that, they brought the Pitt's India Act, so that there is another layer of administration that will govern the East India Company. Then we will talk briefly about the US Constitution. It was the first written constitution of the world. This is also very important. Up till now, no country believed in a written constitution. The country was ruled according to the whims and fancies of the rulers mostly. In some cases, there was some sort of control, like in Britain, there was a parliament, but there also there was no written constitution. But for the first time, there was a written constitution. It was adopted in 1789. It came into force in 1789. There are ideals of liberty, rule of law in it. There are natural rights of men which have been given the bill and in the Bill of Rights. So our fundamental rights in Indian Constitution, the fundamental rights are inspired by the Bill of Rights in US Constitution. Then it tells about the separation of powers. Actually, it was given by Montesquieu. He was also a philosopher, Age of Enlightenment. It says that the different branches of a government like executive, judiciary and legislature should be separate from each other. Their powers should not overlap, and they should be completely independent of each other. Finally, there should be a system of checks and balances between these branches. This was also first time given in the US Constitution. Finally, I will talk about the criticisms of the American Revolution. This is very important. See, as far as I know, a question has not been asked on this criticism aspect of American Revolution. So this becomes very important for you this year. So what are the few criticisms? Firstly, it did not bring about any deep change in the society like French Revolution. French Revolution completely changed the makeup of the French society. There were 3 estates in that. The first and the second estate had the most power. The third did not have any power. But after the French Revolution, everything changed. Nothing of this sort happened in American Revolution. The rich people had power earlier. They had rights earlier. After the revolution, only they had the power. They did not give all the rights that they were talking about to everyone. Their rights were given only to men holding property, that is 15 to 20% of the total population. So basically the right to vote, the right to all those judicial rights, the political rights that were talked about in the US Constitution, they were given only to white men who held property. If you are not having any property, say goodbye to your rights. So only 15 to 20% of the total population is having all those ideal rights that you talked about. The rest population, no rights to slaves. 30% of the population of these 13 colonies was of slaves that were brought from Africa with the slave trade for centuries. Now they were working in those plantations and they were having no rights. In fact, the British Army declared that if any slave would leave their master and come fight with us, we will grant them independence. So many thousands of slaves left their masters and fought along with the British Army in this American War of Independence. Also, there was no right given to women. Women could not own property, they could not inherit property. So it is 50% of the population anyways does not have any power, any right that you are talking about. So it is said that the American Revolution took power from rich white Englishmen who were sitting in London. They had the power to frame the laws. Now it was given to rich white American men who were sitting in cities of New York, Philadelphia or Boston. Now they were framing the laws. They could tax the people. So nothing much changed for a vast majority of the society. The ideas of American Revolution were very strong, but the policies and implementation were weak. It was not up to the mark. So these are the few criticisms of the American Revolution. With this, I come to an end of the lecture. SSC and bank exams that are coming up soon. We have our tablet and pendrive courses for those. So go check them out at studyiq.in or call on this number to know more. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, kindly like, comment, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and share it with your friends. Keep the education revolution going. Have a good day.